everybody. This is take 2 of our Narcissism Expert Series. And I'm so glad you're joining me. We're waiting for my friend Patty Mason to show up, and we're going to talk about how having a narcissist in your life can actually make positive differences overall. Because if we take the viewpoint of looking at the long scale, at the long term, and not just the short term, there's a lot of really good things that come out of these sorts of relationships. So I'm thrilled that you're here. If you don't know who I am, I'm Rita Hickman. I'm a body-mind expert and a shiatsu massage therapist, and my specialty is coaching women to who have narcissistic relationships in their life to really move forward, to get their life into alignment, to work on the things that keep them happy and healthy, and then either stand up or leave or do what they need to do. And so let's add Patty on. I'm going to add her a minute or two until she shows up. And, I've had narcissists in my life in various ways throughout my whole life, especially as a child. That was what really sort of formed my expectation of how to be treated in relationships, of how things should sort themselves out. And hey, Patty, it worked out.
Whew. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm so glad you made it.
Me too. Hello, hello.
Hello. I was so tonight's topic is how having a narcissist in your life can, over the long term, everything. And the reason that I know this is because my first narcissist sort of relationship was with my dad. And, so that was a foundation piece for me. And going through the healing process, evolution and self-reflection and working through all of that really made my life so much better than a lot of people, I think, because I've been able to find sort of that inner peace and that inner, those tools that help keep me sane and happy.
Mm-hmm.
First time you kind of ran into a narcissist in your life?
I'm sure that there were plenty of times in my life and I didn't even have a clue, but my now ex-husband was the big wake-up call. I think it was the first time that I ever really heard the word narcissist. Like, we have words in our vocabulary that we don't even think about their existence until it becomes a part of our life. And that's where it was probably about maybe about 6 months into our divorce. I went for some counseling, and they showed me the wheel of power and control, and started talking about the signs and behavior of a narcissist. And that's when it really like all came together for me, that this was real, and that there are people like this that have a certain pattern of behavior that's very specific. And it just kind of really opened up my world to the toxic people that are out there, predators that are out there, narcissists, manipulators, people who are looking to alter the behavior of another person in a way that they want them to be. And I think that was for me the first relationship where I know that I was with a narcissist and had a relationship with a narcissist.
So what were some of the signs to you that this wasn't a normal relationship, or this might not be a healthy
Um,
relationship?
After I started to learn their behavior, I started to look back at my ex-husband's behavior, and a very perfect example of what he would do with me is I'm not the kind of person who asks for a lot of things, particularly material things and that. Um, and so I had at one point the strap on my purse broke. And I was just like, oh, I'll just go to the store, buy another, $20 purse, and it'll be good for a year, hopefully. And he said, no, he says, you got to buy a good purse that's going to last you. And, um, and he says, we'll go to the purse store in Lake Geneva, make a day of it. And he turned it into this special occasion. And we went there and I picked out the purse that was, the one that I wanted. And he bought the purse, and, we went home, and we had, stopped for coffee on the way there, and, it just kind of made a day of it. And I was so elated and felt so special. And somewhere down the line, something happened, and it was something insignificant, but important enough that I needed to ask him a question about it. And I presented him with a piece of paper, and I said, what's this for? And right away he got on the defensive, and was, well, why are you questioning me on that? Why, and then next thing I know, it was, I do all these nice things for you, and this is what you do. This is how you treat me, is you grill me on things, and you're asking me all these questions, and I need to have the answers right away. And, I didn't give you a hard time when you wanted a purse. What? And
Right.
like, I remember him saying that and putting that out there, and I was like, I don't even know what that has to do with this. And I didn't catch it at that time, but it was things like that that he would say. And as our relationship went on, it even got to the point of, well, that there's no one that would love you like I would. I'm, you can't be loved as much as the love that I give you, and no one would appreciate you like I appreciate you. And it was a lot of his words. And we met in church, and that was the first abuse. Was he tapped into something that was very dear to my heart, very personal, very intimate, and he used that to kind of draw me in, and then steer me. And he was just, he charmed everybody, everyone around us. He had that. He always started conversations with people, and not that that is a bad thing or a wrong thing, um, except he had an intention for it. When he wanted someone on his side, he was the most charming person. It was very intentional and deceptive, intentionally deceptive too. There was even any time that I had a female friend that I would hang out with, he would say, "Oh, you're going to see, you're going to see Amy. Well, you should give me her number just in case something happens and I need to get a hold of her." Well, that kind of makes sense. So he would get her number then, and and then next thing I know, he would be messaging her, but not inappropriately messaging her, but hey, Patty's having a bad day and she's feeling down. And I was trying to think of something that I could do. What suggestions do you have? And he would start a conversation that way, and they would be like, oh. And I remember there was one time that we had a disagreement, and I went over to one of my friend's house to just kind of do the girlfriend thing and vent a little bit and, just separate for a moment. And, and I remember her saying, but he's such a nice guy. He does this and he does that. And I'm like, not really. He did, just because he made everyone around me think that he was such a great guy so that they would, be more on his side. Um, and he was very successful in a lot of those relationships.
Mm-hmm. How did that end up affecting you, or how did that start to make you feel around all of that?
Mm. Um, if nothing just if there's anything that can destroy your trust in the people around you, that for sure will do that. Because that's what it came down to. And here's where it really gets is scary is we were we had known each other for 2 years. We had been married for a year when he became physically abusive. And by that time, um, I I was very isolated. And it was a part of because of that where I was, had started to lose trust in some of the people that were around me. So um, I didn't know who my people were. I didn't know where my circle was that I could go. Who was the person that I could go to and confide into and trust and ask for help? And everyone that was around us, um, they were not, um, they were nice, but they didn't want to get it, they didn't want to have to, like, they didn't want to have to choose, which was really strange to me. Um, and, and so I didn't, so when everything happened, I didn't know where to turn. I felt very, very alone. And in a very vulnerable moment, you don't you don't know where you have to go or if you have, anywhere to go. And that makes it really easy to go back.
Right.
And I believe, and that's, when you look at the psychology of abusers, that is very typical. But they're not always going to be obvious in isolating you, because what he did was he didn't isolate me. I isolated myself because I wasn't sure who I could trust and who was on my side. And so I separated from a lot of people and I didn't trust, I didn't know who I could trust. And so that's how he was very good um, at manipulating the circumstances to best suit him.
So when I grew up, I had a lot of trauma going on in my family. My dad had come from a very emotionally abusive household, and he married my mom, who's very level. And my folks are still together, and actually, I see them every week, and we've done so much healing work around it that it's beautiful. But when I was a kid, by the time I came around, I had a brother who was in a nursing home who was a vegetable from infantile seizures. And my dad was drinking in order to cope with it. And my mom was just trying to hold everybody and everything together. And so the household, it was a constant level of stress, a constant level of underlying anger, and and this very self-absorbed behavior of my dad. Everything in our family was focused on what would keep my father happy. What would keep things as smooth and calm as possible. Don't laugh too loud, don't cry, don't get mad, don't do any of those things. And because of that, my sister and I ended up having other traumas around that, other situations and issues outside of our home, because we learned how to behave without saying anything or asking for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one specific time I went to my grandmother and I said to her, I said, I was like 9 or 10. And I said, you know, there's some real problems at home. And I cried all the time in school. In school, I constantly cried. I'd pee myself. I was a wreck. all the time. And no one thought that was a concern. You know,
Mhm.
no one in authority thought that was a problem. And then when I finally got to the point to reach out to, as I said, my grandmother, I was dismissed and told that I was making it into way too big of a deal. And these
Mhm.
lessons taught me that you can't trust anybody. You can't trust people even when you speak up and say something. And so my dad, his narcissism was based on he was coping as best he knew how, and this was his personality. And he was very empathic and sensitive. And when he was wonderful, he was wonderful. But that was like 1% of the time. The other
Mhm.
99% of the time, he really, really struggled with his anger and his depression and just trying to make it day to day. And everybody loved my dad. He was a party animal. Everybody thought he was great. Him and all the other teachers would hang out together and have big parties. He'd have big birthday parties in our basement. You know, he was the wonderful, fun-loving kind of guy. And but in our home, it was constant anger, and it was constant suppression and oppression. And because I couldn't reach out to any teachers, I couldn't reach out to nurses. Everybody thought that I was a freak of a kid, you know, because I had all these issues. I had all of these allergies and sensitivities to things.
Mhm.
And I was really, I had a lot of problems when I was a kid. And everybody just sort of looked at me as if I was just weird, you know, and nobody really would help because I was the one who had the problem. It wasn't my family dynamics, you know, it wasn't the situation that I was in. And so it was, I'm sorry.
It's
So
okay.
it was really kind of tough to go through that. And I spent a lot of time, I spent decades, you know, then working through those issues. You know, so
Mhm.
if my issues started with narcissists, let's say at birth, I've had a long time now to to get some insight and understanding and healing around it. And one of the things that one of the benefits that I got, hey Tara's here. She's the one from Australia. Uh, one of the benefits I got from being in that sort of relationship in my family is because I became very, very empathic. I became very sensitive to my environment. Now, the
Mhm.
beautiful thing about that, you know, once you go through decades of healing, the beautiful thing about that is it means that you can enjoy life on a bigger level than other people
Mhm.
do. It means that you have a level of sensitivity to beauty and love because because when you're in the relationship with someone who is so self-absorbed and you have to be on guard all the time,
Mhm.
constantly wondering, you know, we'd have these conversations in my family of uh, who made dad mad? Did you make him mad? No, I don't know. Did you make him mad? Nobody would know, you know, but there
Mhm.
would be this anger around. And so I got really good at reading people. I got really good at sensing my environment and my surroundings. And on the positive side of that, after you go through that and heal that, it means that I can experience life in a joyful way, in a really present, wonderful, loving way that I, because of my heightened sensitivity, colors are deeper, sounds are more beautiful, moments are
Mhm.
more meaningful for me because I developed that heightened sensitivity to my environment because I was in such a high level of stress because that's what happens. You know,
Mhm.
our antenna gets a lot better and we're able to not only project our emotions to other people, but also really feel what's going on. And so it gave
Mhm.
me an edge because as I got older, it meant that I could read people better. I could read situations better. I could navigate them better. I saw things that other people didn't see. And, um, and that was one of the really great benefits of it. Being hardwired or forced to become more sensitive means that you become more sensitive to the good things too. And that was really, really cool. Have you found any of that so far? in your healing work?
Um, Definitely. In particularly with self-defense. Because everything was I look back now and everything from that moment put me on a path. And once I started to understand this whole dynamic of, a narcissist, a manipulator, an abuser, and um, and as I was doing that, I was going out and learning self-defense for myself and different aspects of it, and all of it was, now I see it was just one step forward and forward to where I'm at now. And the biggest thing is the information that I have now has given me the ability to look at relationships so differently, and not just those intimate relationships, but the relationships with the people in your family, the relationships with the people that you work with, the any relationships in your environment, anyone who comes into contact with me and we cross paths. I'm very conscious of their behavior and our interaction. And because that a lot of that has come from what I've learned and what I teach um, about that mindset. In class, we're gearing it more towards that predator mindset, and I use those words, predator, attacker, but it can go towards, because that's a lot of what it is someone who is a narcissist. It's very similar mindset. um, they have a lack of power and control in some aspects of their life, and to replace that they take it from someone else. And um, the best example is when I think it was in the first year of my self-defense business, and I met a woman at a networking group who was another business owner, and she had a completely different business in a completely different industry, but we were in the same community. And um, and she contacted me and she said, "Hey, I know this lady who would be a great place to hold classes. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Sounds great. Get me her information." And instead of giving me the information, she talked to the woman for me, and then played the mediator and wouldn't give me the opportunity to connect with the woman. And if I did, she was a part of it. She was always there. Whenever I would go to meet the lady, she was there. And then I did the class, and um, she put herself in it, like she was not just helping me, but assisting me. And even her communications, like during the class, her questions weren't more of questions. They were like, I almost felt at one point she wanted to get up and come stand next to me, and teach the class too. Um, and then she contacted me after that and said, "So I've got this, other location." And I'm like, "Great, give me the contact's name and phone number, and I'll set it up." Okay, great. Appreciate the referral. And then, and then she started to do it again. And then this is where I caught my attention, and I was like, something's not right. And every time I tried to remove her so that I can do my business, she even sends me a message one day and says, "Here, I created a flyer for our class." And it's her business and the class, and my information was this little strip on the bottom. And I'm kind of scratching my head going, wait a minute. And I said, "Well, I appreciate that, but I actually have a flyer that I'm going to be using." And then she got very, defensive at me. And I was like, okay, and as you're seeing these, you start to kind of take note. And it was shortly after that, there was one more thing that happened. And I said, you know what? I don't think I'm going to be able to work with you. And I cut ties to end the relationship. And I have no regrets whatsoever of doing that. Um, but um, like many bullies, you have to be very careful when you push them into a corner. And she felt like she was being pushed into a corner, and all I was doing was separating from her, but to her, she was being exposed and being left out. And so she backlashed and she blasted everyone that we knew, what a bad person I am, and I stole from her and all this stuff, and blasted information to my customers, was putting stuff on social media. And this went on for months of just this constant. And everyone was like, first of all, we're just ignoring her because we know it's not true. But second of all, at a certain point, they all were like, get over this. This is all even done. And she just she impacted a lot of other people's lives that we were mutually connected with, because of this. That networking group that we both belonged to, um, they she showed up for a meeting, and in the parking lot started screaming at the organizer because I was being allowed to be there. And the organizer said, listen, what's between you two is between you two and has nothing to do with this group. And so she went off on this woman in the parking lot, and belittled her and then started saying bad things about her. And it turns out that she had some, internal issues, and she ended up, resigning as the leader of that group. And that's the last time I ever saw her. And so her behavior impacted so many other people. Um, but I don't think that I would have recognized that situation as quickly as I had, um, if I didn't have the experience, and the knowledge from that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Growing up in the family that I did, and it, making me freaked out about everything and making me hyper aware of people, what it did is, oddly enough, because I didn't have great social skills, is I would go into a situation and only the people who were willing to kind of jump through a few hoops, who were willing to, deal with my candor and my awkwardness and my directness and, and all of these skills that I developed, as a kid. Most people, they went away on their own. I had a mentor who once said that you don't have to tell anyone to go away. Be yourself, and the people who don't want to be there, they'll go away on their own. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was able to surround myself with really fantastic people. I
Mm-hmm.
ended up marrying somebody who was just awesome, one of the nicest men in the world. And I met him at 20. And and his family were in 12-step programs, and so of course I liked his family better than mine. But it meant that I avoided a lot of problems that other people
Mm-hmm.
had to learn when they got older, because I was so strange, because of my lack of relationship and communication and social skills. um, I wasn't as desirable to people who were really screwed up, who were
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic, and they avoided me. And only the people that were like, gee, what's going on here? I'm curious about you. Who are you? And spent time with me and got to know me. Those were the ones that stuck around. So I ended up
Mm-hmm.
with really lovely people and avoiding a lot of other normal adult experiences. Somebody had a judgment of me once, And the judgment was that that I would put myself into situations that other people might consider, a little bit riskier. And that kind of happens when you grow up in trauma. You tend to be more of a risk taker, because you're more comfortable with the feeling of stress and anxiety and aggression, and you're more comfortable with adrenaline, and
Hmm.
which is another benefit that I got from the whole situation, is that I'm a better entrepreneur, I'm a better business person, because I'm able to take risks and I can usually handle discomfort better than other
Right,
people. And
right.
um, it just, having those life experiences and working through it meant that I got to avoid a lot of other problems that other people had
Mhm.
by drawing into their life, people who were out to prey on them, because I wasn't valuable enough in the narcissist's eyes for them to want to prey on me. It
Mhm.
was a really nice side effect from it. So I skated through a lot of other issues that other women had to deal with, with boyfriends and romances and other things going on in their lives. Because I was so stressed out, I couldn't handle any sort of conflict. I couldn't handle it, and so I'd have to leave, or or hang around people who were tolerant and patient and wonderful to me. And
Mhm.
so that was a really good benefit. Did you find that you got better discernment with your circle of friends, and you actually got better friends than before?
Mhm. Yeah, and it's funny. There's always those friendships that come and go, and they have reasons for that. But the solid relationships that I've had over the years and friendships, yes, they are the exact people that I would want and need in my life if anything ever happened.
Right. You get much better discernment of the people in your life.
Hmm.
So because
Yeah.
I had this high sensitive spidey sense, I could take bigger risks because I just knew which people to avoid. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, don't put yourself in this situation with this person because that would be bad. Don't do
Right.
these things. And so I was kind of able to navigate and see from my heightened state of observation. They've done some research on people who are in crisis have the ability to recognize nice people and people who will help them much better. It's they can
Hmm.
tell from body language and facial expressions. They're able to pick out the ones in the crowd that will be most beneficial and helpful to them. So when you're in a state of trauma or crisis for long periods of time, you get better at saying, okay, this person I need to stay away from, this person I need to draw closer to, because it's almost like you're even more attuned. You can
Yes.
feel their energy, you can recognize it, and you're like, okay, these are the people that I want to spend time with, and these are the people I want to avoid. It's really
Yes.
interesting.
And it's getting back to um it's getting back to our nature, our natural sense. We all have basic instincts, um, gut feelings, no different than the instincts that animals have. Now, they have a little bit different instincts, but they have instincts, and we have them too. But as human beings, because of the power of our mind, we're the only animals on this planet that talk ourselves out of our instincts. Our gut tells us that something doesn't feel right. And we bring this up in this is a huge, huge aspect of self-defense is listening to that intuition and being in tune with it and connecting with it and listening to it because it is telling you something. And there's an incredible book that I highly recommend. I bring it up at every single class, and I share it with everyone. It's Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear. here is an incredibly powerful book. And he says in there, he says, anyone who has experienced a attack, for example, a violent crime, they go back and some point, if you keep asking them questions, at some point they'll say, I had this feeling, or there was this moment. Um, that's our bodies. I watched a fascinating YouTube video one time, while I was searching for um, inspiration on intuition. There's a YouTube video out there that was done by the guy who created Snapchat. And he was talking about that it's an actual biological thing inside of our body. It's not in our heads. That's very important for people to understand. Your instinct isn't up here. Your instinct is in here, in your gut. And he talked about these chemicals. And when someone walks into the room and you're like, I don't know, I just got a bad feeling about that person. That's their chemistry mixing, wafting across the room to you and mixing with your chemistry and sending a message to your brain. So, yes, if you get that feeling about someone that, I don't think that they're trust, listen to that. And the more in tune you are with your body, the more that you will have those instincts and you'll know.
And that was one benefit that came to me, is because for the longest time, being in that trauma, um, and being forced to endure, those sorts of secrets, that, keeping everything under wraps, you really begin to not trust yourself. You don't trust anything. And when you're kind of raised that way, you don't know what to believe, because all you know is that your body is in a constant state of stress, constantly on red alert, and you don't get those subtleties. And doing my work, what happened is I ended up with much better intuition, because whatever
Mhm.
you focus on, whatever you heal, whatever you want to work on is what develops. And because I felt that I had no intuition at all, that the people that I liked were bad for me and the people that I didn't like ended up being good for me, and I couldn't sort my head around it as to what felt good or what felt bad. And so I had to put a lot of work into that, into fixing it. And what it turned into is a confidence in myself that is palpable to people around me. A confidence
Mhm.
that I'm like, no, I do know how I feel. I do know what's going on, and I get to decide how I want to handle it. And so I can feel things or see things many times before they happen, but then I can also, um, being through trauma and being in tough situations and having your body go into fight or flight, you also learn that not everything is as bad as you originally think it is. And that many things we have so much power over. And if we can sense what's going on and follow the energy and navigate how to do things, and follow that hypersensitivity of our intuition, many times we can create relationships from people who might have had some problems, who might have been more self-absorbed or might have had bigger issues. Um, it can You can really um, turn a lot of things around,
Mhm.
because you have the ability to endure that discomfort, and or find the tools that help you endure that discomfort,
Mhm.
like CBD oil, like tapping, like making sure that you walk and get your fiber and get your hydration. I mean, what you start to find when you're in these narcissistic high stress relationships is you have got to find the tools that help keep you sane and safe.
Mhm.
And so it's like you crack the code in many ways. You start out with, I'm helpless, I'm out of control, and I'm overwhelmed. And you start to be like, I have to take my life and my power back. So now
Yep.
I'm into a position where I can go into other levels of stress, and I've got all of my tools that are already in place that I can use, that help keep
Mhm.
me shaping and moving through a situation which might be more uncomfortable for other people. You know, one of the things I read
Right.
about success was successful people are the people who are willing to do things that other people are not willing to do. And
Hmm.
so having to constantly face that level of discomfort, like you having to come home and, you know, he's home and what's going to happen? And is it going to be a bad night or a good night? Or, you know, what specific words should I say? How should I respond to this? You know, ours was, you know, oh my God, dad's mad because dinner's late. You know, so you you developed this ability to be okay with being uncomfortable, which meant
Hmm.
that you had the resilience when you came across other uncomfortable situations in the future to be
Right.
able to keep your wits about you, to make game plans, and to really have a bigger vision. You know, instead of where a lot of people are, is they end up in a very reactionary state. And one of the gifts I was given is that I'm able to hold a vision that's years down the road or decades down the road, or even to the end of my life for the next generation. I can hold that vision and be in an uncomfortable situation because I know I'm in process. I know
Hmm.
I'm moving there, and we have to go through this if we want to get to where I want to be. And most people don't have that. They don't have that bigger vision. They don't know who they are or what they want to do. And when you go through the fires of relationships like you and I have, you become pretty clear on who you are, what you believe, what you want, how you want your life to look. You know, because you're forced to go through that because you end up feeling so lost and so confused and so um, off balance
Hmm.
that that's another one of those things that you focus on and you're like, who am I? So I started to ask, who am I? You know, when I first started my healing journey, who am I? What do I want? What do I believe? You know, because I was so, because those questions started so quickly for me,
Hmm.
because I had become what my family had wanted me to come to, you know, to become. And so it was going through that confusing time really made me much more defined.
Absolutely. It's I remember that aha moment that I had where it was, no, this is not okay. Um, I don't deserve to feel this way, and nobody deserves to feel this way. Another person should not have this kind of power over somebody. Um, and at this point, I was like, he was out of my life, and yet he still had control because he was still up here.
Yeah.
And it was that it was that moment of, like you said, it's time for me to take back my power. It's time for me to become, me anymore. It's become me again. And 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 the biggest thing is, um know that it's a journey. This is not something that, um and I'm sure I'm still on that journey, and I'm sure you're still on that journey. It will be a lifelong experience, but I will, like, every time I overcome a moment, a trigger, every time I have, I remember the first time that I saw him, um, after our divorce, after I stood up for myself, after I had left. The first time that I saw him was in a very, very public place. And all of these emotions came back. Um, but I had a lot of tools at that point and was able to got on the phone with my support, put myself in a safe place, and then worked through it, in my head, and was able to very quickly get back to a place where it didn't matter anymore. And you you climb that hill, and then somewhere down the line there's another one, and that um, you build on that. The more that you empower yourself, the more empowered that you become. And it sounds so simple, but it is. It's so valuably true that you do. Um, like 20 million examples, running through my head, and it has the ability to create um, a very powerful, very confident person. And I know that I've I've been involved and connected and collaborated with a lot of people who have been in different yet similar situations, and each and every one of them shares their story, and that empowers others. And not only do they share their story, but they go out and they're doing things that continue to lift them up and empower themselves. Um, Whether it is the woman at the college who was raped by a classmate, and a very um, traumatic experience for her, and it lasted for a couple years until she had her aha moment, and went out and got her power back, and then went out and spoke to other college women, and continued to share her story, and used that experience. What I always say is, for a purpose bigger than you. That's exactly what you're doing here. Is there are so many people out there that that are struggling, or have been able to um, get the narcissist out of their life, but they're still in their head, and they don't know where to go. And you're bringing all of this information and all of these stories and all of these experiences and putting them out there, and it's a purpose, and it's a purpose bigger than you. And there's something about that when you share your experience, not only is it healing for yourself, but it gives hope to others, and kind of perpetuates this. And I believe that that's a big part of you know how we're going to continue to have aha moments, because we see what you've been able to overcome, the things that have happened in your life, and not only how they've impacted you, but how you've overcome them, and how you've controlled how they shape you. And just sharing that and just putting this out there, other people can now see that, and are more people are open to having that aha moment and saying, yes, I'm going to take my power back. Whether their story is similar or different, as victims, um, we all have that little connection, because we can all relate. There is a level where we all relate, no matter what our experience is. And I think that's the key to this, is to know that where you're at is just where you're at now. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to, that doesn't have to define you. It's you. You have the choice. You have the choice to empower yourself. We're here to help you empower yourself. I can't empower you. I can't walk with you all day, every day, and hold your hand, just in case you're attacked. Um, but I can give you the tools. I can share with you the tools that worked for me. The tools that I've learned are available, to not only protect yourself, but to also overcome. And the same thing is what you're sharing. These are all tools and resources of what people can use. But trust that you're worth it, and reach out for those tools. And that's that aha moment that you're going to have. Um, and that's where things are going to move forward, and you're going to continue to have your power back.
What happened for me was I also developed a level of compassion, because when you have to forgive things which are unforgivable, and we have to forgive for our own sanity, we have to forgive for our own inner peace. When you're able to
Absolutely.
forgive things which are considered totally unforgivable, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and you have to make peace with it in some way, what happens is I ended up with a high level of loving compassion, because I had to look at, why does a pedophile do this? Why does a father behave this way? And try
Hmm.
to come to terms with it without vilifying anybody, with saying, how do these circumstances and how the brain is shaped, and the chemistry and the DNA, how does all of that contribute to people making choices which are so harmful to other people? And so, on the front end, it may be like, well, I can't trust anybody at all. But when after you do the healing work, you realize that you can look at people, you can look past their behavior to the person that they are. And you're able to see them more clearly and also accept them better, accept them
Hmm.
more clearly. So I don't get knocked off balance as easily, because I'm able to look at someone and say, that's their behavior. That's not who
Hmm.
they are. And then I can determine how close I want to get to them, whether it's an experience I want to have or not. But it helps me stay grounded, because I know that who they are and what they're going through is so very different from what their behavior may be demonstrating. Because, like with my dad, his patterns of behavior and his level of stress, and the craziness that was going on inside of him and in his brain and heart and gut and all of it turned him into somebody who could not be present, who would inflict his emotions and his emotional turmoil on the people that he loved the most, and who
Hmm.
were most vulnerable to him. And so for me to come back and heal that relationship with my dad, I had to say, what would cause a father to behave this way?
Right.
What would shape them? Why did this happen? And by doing that, I could look at my dad and start looking at the good qualities, and start looking at the love that he would give and the attempts that he tried. He would come home from work almost every day and go right to sleep. And the reason he did that was because he was in such a bad mood, and he really didn't want to inflict it on anybody else. He just was anger. He just walked around radiating anger. But he wouldn't yell or take it out on anybody. He'd just be angry, and he would immediately isolate himself so that it wouldn't impact us as much as it did. And I was able to say, what? Things were really, 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 really tough for my dad. His internal
Hmm.
world was rough, and he did the best that he knew how. Doesn't mean that the behavior is
Right.
acceptable, but he did the best that he knew how. I once had a friend who said to me, they said, about my family. This was before I'd done a bunch of my healing work. They said, "Well, your parents did the best that they knew how." And I was like, you know what? That's totally unacceptable. That's a bad, you know, reason. And I was really resistant. But it got me thinking. It got me looking deeper at human beings and human nature. And instead of just writing people off as no good, I was able to become a healer that could walk next to people who were struggling and be there with them, because I could look past their awkwardness and their lack of communication skills and their social skills and the fact that they didn't fit into the box that normal looks like. And I could look past all of that and say, who are you as a person? Let's get your story. And when I would find out people's stories, that's when my compassion would come in,
Hmm.
because then I could be like, aha, this is a
Right.
side effect of what you're going through, so let's work on the causes of why you behave this way. Is it your
Hmm.
digestion? Is it your life skills? Is it suppressed emotions you haven't worked through yet. What is it? And it made me a much happier person because I was a much more compassionate and less judgmental person. It makes me pretty safe to be around for most people
Yeah.
because they can see and know that I'm going to be compassionate and I probably won't judge them and I'll be nice to them. And it's brought me so much joy because people tend to respond differently to me because of that. They can see that
Mhm.
I'm nice, they can see that I'm safe, and they're like, oh, I want to be nice to the nice person, you know?
Right.
So I really developed a high level of compassion for human nature,
Mhm.
and why we do the things that we do and how we work. I mean, have you noticed that at all in your
Um,
healing that you've done?
yeah. So much. One of the things, um, first to touch on that you were saying is absolutely, I think the one of the first things that I did, um, and it was not an easy thing to do, because it was, um, you know, just like your experience, was with your father. That's a very close, intimate relationship. And my experience was, um, with someone who I loved, one of the first people that I loved and thought I loved at a deeper level, and enough that I married them. And so there's a lot of emotion, and it's really hard to one, have forgiveness, but to also have that compassion for that person. But I already knew from past experiences in my life how valuable that is. And I think I really learned that, right before I turned 30 years old. I read C.S. Lewis's, Mere Christianity. And I can't tell you anything else that is in that book except for one little paragraph, and it was on forgiveness. And he says, you know what? Forget about faith, religion, Christianity, any of that stuff. Let's get down to the meat and potatoes of human being relationships. We have to forgive someone because they make the decisions at that moment based on the information they have at that moment. And that hit me. And it was so profound because I took it back to, um, the relationship with my father, um, which had been completely non existent since I was 8 years old. And um, was able to work through that and have forgiveness there. So I remember that, and I knew how critical of a piece that was going to be for my healing, was being able to have that compassion for the person who hurt me so badly on a level that very few other people would ever be able to. And um and like you said, it doesn't justify his behavior. It doesn't make it okay. I still to this day believe that he is, and that he has the potential for danger, of potentially being a dangerous person. But I also know that he is a man. He's an 8-year-old boy trapped in a man's body. He had a traumatic experience, at 8 years old. And I believe that where that's where he switched. And to protect himself in his world at that age, he created in his mind an alternate world, and then proceeded to live in that world and go down that path. And everything that you look at, the words that he said, the way that he talked, everything goes back to he was the victim. He was always the victim. It was always everyone against him, all of these things. And everything deep in the meanings of what he said went back to that experience. And so understanding that and where he's coming from, absolutely. I have compassion, even to the point where um, the reason that he used that moment to physically attack me was because I had confronted him recently, and I had put some cards on the table that um, were potentially going to, if exposed, would expose him and who he really is. And that's his whole world was about protecting that. And so I became a threat. And it was like, pushing him into a corner where he felt that he was in a fight or flight situation. And it was either he was going to be fully exposed or he had to quash the enemy. And I was the enemy. And so therefore that's what he did, was he attacked the enemy. Um, I don't believe that he knew it was me, but deeper in his head, that was somebody else. Um, and and because of this altered sense of reality, this altered world that he lived in, to this day, he doesn't see anything that he did wrong. And he's spent time in jail, and um, domestic abuse and a battery, which, even though they are misdemeanors, they have the same penalties as a felony, and they're on his record. There is this, on there, but I didn't do anything wrong. In
Right.
his mind, he truly, truly believes that. And you know what? That's his world that he has to live in. I make sure that I am safe in my world, and I don't have to worry about that. Um, I am conscious that him and many others like him exist in this world. And so I stay aware and conscious of that, and use the tools and the knowledge that I have to continue to protect myself, um, because I have that vulnerability that I could have someone like that come back into my life. And so I stay protected. But I also, at the same time, you have to have compassion and understanding. But we know that like in your life, you decided that you still wanted this person in your life. And so you were going to do what needed to be done to protect you so that you could continue to have that person in your life. And we have to make that decision. Is it okay? Or, what are you okay with and what are you not okay with? And then move forward from there. And if you are going to have, and we all have people like this in our lives, like I said, whether they're people that bump into at the neighborhood picnic, or you work with them, or you're related to them, or you're in a relationship with them, um, there are things that we need to do to protect ourselves. And a big part of that is how we take care of ourselves. And and getting into, because here's the thing, when you are interacting with these people, one of the biggest things that we keep talking about is recognizing, assessing, the situation, being fully conscious mentally when you're going to be in a situation where you're interacting with this person. If your head is not healthy, if your mind is not capable of being that level of awareness, then you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle with being able to do that, because your mind is maybe overwhelmed and exhausted and distracted from the stresses of life, or poor eating habits, or pain and inflammation that's inside of the body. If you have those kinds of things going on in your head, is focused on something else and constantly being pulled away, you're not going to have the necessary. And I'm not saying that you need to be, wide awake and alert at all times, but we we need to be conscious. We need to be aware. No different than, you know, if I was going out this evening and, going to go run some errands and stop at a gas station, I get out of my car, I'm going to be aware of my surroundings. I do it in the middle of the day. And I do it because that's just the world that we live in. There are people that are looking for an easy target or someone who's vulnerable, and just being aware of your surroundings is a way to prevent yourself from getting in that situation. Well, it's the same thing with a narcissist. You need to be aware, and awareness starts with how well you're taking care of yourself. Are you going to have the energy to be able to ride the roller coaster? And so are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating the right foods? Hemp oil, that's a big part of um, what I love about the power of phytocannabinoids and this endocannabinoid system that we have is what it has the ability to do for the brain in helping you be able to think clearly and focus. Even though you may have other things going on, that's what it does. I always tell people, it's not going to get rid of your stress. Your bills are still going to show up at your house. You're still going to, you're still going to get stuck in traffic. I haven't been able to take hemp oil and all the lights turn green. I'm waiting for that day. But you're still going to have those things, but you're going to be able to better think and process those individual moments and experiences in your life when you have that clarity of mind. So yeah, you got to eat some fresh fruits and vegetables. Yeah, you have to be drinking water. You have to stay hydrated. The brain needs water, and all those other things don't count. It needs good, clean water. And um, so a big part of um, just living in our world, let alone living with a narcissist in your life, we have to take care of ourselves. And that's what I love about this whole series is if you're catching on to what she's throwing, it's not about the narcissist. Everything she's been talking about, listen, I'm letting you guys in on the big secret she's been hiding from you. This isn't about them. This is about you. This is about you journaling. You know, every day I try to get into my journal and write my at least 3 things that I'm grateful for every day. There's so many parts of my life that helps, and this is another part of it. I live in a life of gratitude, and I may not show it 100% of the time, but in general, I'm happy because I'm happy, because I
Mm-hmm.
make that conscious choice to appreciate life, appreciate waking up in the morning, and another day to breathe, and another day to
Right.
help other people.
Right.
And yeah.
And that's what came out of my family, because we had gone through, I like to liken it to the survivors of a shipwreck. I look at other people's families and I see siblings who hate each other and who screw each other over, and families who are so broken apart. And what happened to our family is because we went through this turmoil and through this trauma, dealing with my father and trying to bring our family together, that we are holding on to it as tightly as we can. It's become one of the most precious things in my life for us to get closer, for my sister and I to get closer, my mother and I to get closer, for my dad and all of us to get closer. We've become like so grateful to have this second chance. And I think whenever you go through a really difficult experience and you come out on the other side, you're like, I get another chance at life. Just like,
Mm-hmm.
people
Oh my
who,
God, yeah.
who die or think they're going to die or whatever, suddenly you're like, you know what? The rest of my life is okay because I made it through this. Now, the other neat thing that happened to me when I was a kid is when you're a kid in a narcissistic or toxic sort of relationship, it's very complex because you can't be mad at the people that you're dependent on. And your
Mm-hmm.
brain, and you aren't evolved enough as a person, your brain hasn't grown enough in order to develop these coping skills and to to really empower yourself. You're truly in a victim mode. But one of the natural things that comes out of that is, first of all, you realize that your body and your mind is always going to protect itself. It's going to find some way to protect itself no matter what. And for a lot of kids, what happens is their tool is disassociation. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're able to watch what's happening without being in the middle of what's happening. And from a spiritual perspective, this has been so beneficial for me because I can't tell you how many people I talk to who they're in the middle of an emotional experience and they cannot see past that emotional experience. They can't keep that little piece of their brain or their soul or their heart that says, "Oh, isn't this interesting that this is happening?" And so
Mm-hmm.
because I would dissociate, it almost split my brain, to the point where I had that one part of me that was the watcher. And when you talk about Buddhism, one of the biggest things is that you have an observer and you cultivate an observer. And I've had an observer my entire life because of that dissociation. So it wasn't something I had to develop. It was just something I had to recognize and realize no matter what situation I'm in, I always have that part of me that's safe, that's watching it, that can keep me, maybe making decisions which, are more in my interest and might work out. When you go through any sort of traumatic experience, I think many people, if it's bad enough, they have to disassociate from it. They have to, go out of body and watch it happening. And the gift on the other side of that is that now you can watch your life, and you can keep perspective and keep an observation and not be um, completely overwhelmed and lost in whatever emotion that you're in, like so many people do. So, splitting my brain when I was younger, gave me uh, that spiritual wisdom because I could
Mm-hmm.
not only live the experience, I could also watch the experience that I was living, and I could do both at the same time. And they say that you truly become evolved or wise or an elder when you can hold two completely opposite points of view at the very same time. And I'm like, oh yeah, I totally can do that. Been able to do that my entire life. You know, yes, you were the biggest jerk in the planet. And what's going on here? Isn't this interesting? How curious. It's able to have both. And so for my spiritual development and my connection with God and all there is and all that neat stuff, I've always been able to have that and cultivate that. And once I stopped judging myself as, let's say, Sybil, who had 20 different personalities going on, I could say, oh, this is the observer. This is interesting. And so it's given me so much more wisdom and insight and the ability to verbalize things and see things that are hidden to other
Mm-hmm.
people because of it. And so if you've struggled, if anybody struggled with dissociation, that's the gift that can come out of that can come out of that sort of a trauma.
That's very interesting. Um, yeah, that, that's what I love. That's a huge, huge insight into, um, again, the power of how experiences can impact us and change us. Um, and I really believe that each of us individually has the ability to to direct where our life is going and how the things that happen to us and have happened to us um, direct direct our life. And and I think some of it is um, built in, um, that, I think about my life growing up, um, and there was always something that I was I was always able to find good in all the situations and experiences, and I didn't always understand, um, but as much as things impacted me, like to a certain extent, they rolled off of me. Like they impacted me, and they, like, there was an indentation. There was impact, but I kept going, and it was a part of that internal drive. But I believe that everyone has the strength within themselves, um, to really choose, um, what they get out of every experience in life. And your story is a perfect example, how someone can take a experience, and not only have you been able to put your life down a specific path, that leads us to where we are, but you were able to impact your whole family, and that whole dynamic, and that's incredibly powerful. um and we all have that in us. It's You had a desire in you that wanted um to bring that out, and you searched for the answers, and then put them into action, and that's the power.
Yes. And that's what comes from when you get to the other side of this stuff. As I said, I've been working on the healing process for decades now, and I started it when I was young. And it's having people who are more toxic or narcissistic in my life because of their demands for me to be more kind, more compassionate, more flexible, more sensitive. They would demand it of you because of their needs were so strong. It got me out of um, my own victim mind.
Hmm.
One of the things that traps us is when we look at a situation and um, and we're reactionary to it. We aren't present to it, and we miss all of the things that are going on with other people. And when you're forced in some ways, emotionally or because of the situation, to be more sensitive, you you're able to look past yourself. You're able to
Hmm.
look past just you and look at the community, look at the bigger impacts, and make nicer choices and better choices and kinder choices because um, because you were forced to think outside of your box. A lot of people. One of the rules of thumb is victims tend to be the biggest victimizers. Because they end up with so much unresolved pain that they end up being narcissistic or sociopathic and totally absorbed
Hmm.
in their own experience. But when you work through that healing process, you no longer become completely absorbed in your own experience. You're looking for the greatest good for everybody that you care about and what will help all of us move in a positive direction. And that's what was able to let me go back to my family and say, what does my family need? How can I lead the way? How can I help
Hmm.
them meet some of these needs so that they can get past the wounds, so that they can evolve, so that we can get some self esteem, put down some of the fears and realize we're not the person that we used to be. We're now in a different
Hmm.
place. The biggest leap for me was realizing that I was no longer a 4-year-old girl, and that everybody else wasn't a 4-year-old traumatized girl either. I start to be like, oh, what was your experience? What do you need? It pushed me to really look beyond myself to that bigger picture. And yeah, it was hard because when you have to be hypersensitive about making sure that somebody else's needs are met, otherwise the world's going to come crashing down around your head. You start to look at other people in your life and being like, you know what? I like you. I want to help you get your needs met and I can see it. How can I help?
Hmm.
So it shapes us into these evolved, wise, kind human beings that really bring community together, but only if you have the courage and the support to feel whatever you need to feel and to get good self esteem around your voice, your empowerment, about how things turn out. I can't tell
Hmm.
you how many conflicts I had with my dad. They were silent, they were my internal conflicts. And I had no self esteem around. Around speaking to him, around that things would turn out okay. I had no self-esteem that if I speak up, I'm actually not going to end up homeless on a street corner. And so when you're kind of cornered and you're forced to speak up because you can't take it anymore, you start to recognize that, oh, conflict is temporary.
Hmm.
People ebb and flow. It's not all or nothing. It's not I'm mad and I'm mad for forever. It's I'm mad until I feel better. And then when I feel better, let's look at what's next. But because I was trapped in the idea of I can never speak because the world's going to come to an end, and it affected all of my relationships. But it pushed me to be like, I have to figure this out. If I speak, will the world really come to an end? If they get mad, if I have conflict, will really I be devastated? Will everything go
Right.
down the waste disposal? And when you look at people and talk to people, one of the biggest challenges they have is with conflict,
Hmm.
is with understanding how anger and conflict work, that there's an ebb and a flow and a rhythm to it, and that maybe it'll be okay. Maybe if we stay grounded, or even if we screw it up and totally overreact and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, that a lot of times it turns out okay on the other side. A lot
Hmm.
of times you can save it or rescue it from the jaws of destruction. You wait for your time, for the mood or the energy to shift or slow down, and then you make the change. You that's what you watch for. You're like, okay, this is going to be like this, it's going to be like this for a few days, and then it's going to come back down, and then we'll be able to have this conversation.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable with conflict than I ever was before, because I've got more self-esteem around it. I've got more experiences about how it actually works. Did you find
Yeah.
that too?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it also has to do with our, goes back to what you're talking about, and it's our perspective on the situation. An experience comes up, an interaction with somebody, and you have the ability to, and you and I were talking about this very recently, the way that we respond, the words that we use, um, how we can, you know, and that's, and it goes back to being in a conscious place where your head is in a good place, your mind, your thoughts are, you know, in a healthy place. Because if you're having a bad day, if your hormones are off or you didn't sleep well, how are you going to react to those things and to the other people around you? And if you're at that um, higher sensitivity and somebody says something to you, or that toxic person walks in, and there's an interaction with them, it's going to go in a bad place, based on how you respond. And if you are not in a good place yourself, then that's where they're going to go and you're going to go. And then that's where you're going to have these conflicts where
Right.
we're having a heightened awareness um, and a healthy mind to be able to listen to somebody and hear not just what they're saying, but what's behind it. Where you can say, okay, this person is there's something not okay with the way that they're trying to control or manipulate your actions. Um, and you can then respond in a way that isn't isn't two rams, hitting heads, but where you're
Right.
actually, you know, totally unobviously taking their hand and guiding them. It's you being in control. And
Right.
sometimes the situation requires you to stand up for yourself and have a certain level of assertiveness. But it's not, and this was the key that I got out of what you and I were talking about the other day, is it's not about being assertive at that person. It's not, um, you're not going to do that anymore. You're not going to treat me that way anymore. It's acknowledging that that's who that person is for whatever reasons.
Whatever
That's
reason.
that's who they are. And so you walk into that space and you're like, okay, well, I know that this is how that person is. And so I know the deeper meaning of what they're saying, and maybe they just need someone to say something nice to them. I had a
Mhm.
situation recently with another business owner that I work with, and we're kind of on the same team, and every interaction that I have with her, she has this aggression and animosity, and it doesn't matter what I say. I feel like I'm the enemy, and I'm like, I'm trying to be helpful, and we keep doing this. And so one, I know that she's got some kind of internal conflict with me, whatever it is. Um, I know, because I'm able to know a little bit about what's going on in her life. She is in a abusive relationship and has a narcissist in her life. And so because of what I do and who I am, that's an intimidating threat to her, because even though she's the victim, I'm one of the few people around her. And she's got good friends who are very outgoing, outspoken people that they'll say to her, you need to get out of that relationship. And, you need to protect your kids. And but I'm not that kind of person. I'm the person who says, listen, this is a very serious, dangerous situation where you and your kids are in a potentially life or death situation. And this is the reality. I'm the person who's going to open the book and say, narcissist, abuse. I'm going to give it words that she may not be comfortable with. Now, because of the knowledge that I have, I'm able to like totally dissect 30 seconds worth of information that I have about her and fully understand where she's coming from. But because of that, I know one, that advice from me is not healthy for her. It doesn't, it's, she she has to protect herself from what I say, even if it has absolutely nothing to do, with a relationship. And I could be like, hey, you should, you want to drink some water? Would you like some water? And what makes you think I want water? Because I was pouring some for everybody. That's the reaction. So I know that that's what it is. And I have to choose what moments that I interact and how I interact, but also um, every opportunity that I can find where I give her love and compliment her, I do it because, well, one, she needs that in her life, and she's not getting it, um, even from the circle of people, because of how she's treating her friends and the people near her that try to help her. So she just needs love. She doesn't need me to offer her water, offer her advice, or help her in any other way, except to just show her and let her know that I'm a loving and caring person. And if you ever want someone to trust, I'm here. That's the role that I have to recognize in our relationship is um I if she sees me coming in as any form of authority or anything, and even just as simple as, can I fill your water glass? To her, that is a threat, and I have the ability to be able to recognize that, and um, maybe my compassion and kindness can have that impact on her life. That's all it is. But I have to be around her. I have to work with her, and so I need to be aware of our dynamic in our relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that I walk on shells when I'm around her. I am still me, and that's a key component to what we're talking about is you still need to be true to you and who you are, but you have the gift, we'll call it that, the gift, the blessing, the opportunity um, to utilize that. And so what you had said to me the other day was absolutely brilliant in your words is, I know you're going to do this again. I know that this behavior at some point is going to repeat itself. And I'm not going to tell you that there's an ultimatum or it's not okay or whatever. I'm just going to tell you that when you do this, this is what I'm going to do. And it's I'm completely open and um to my feelings, and that's we need to be we need to take ownership of our own feelings. um we also at the same time need to understand that our feelings are just as important as someone else's, and because of that, it's not a um I'm not going to go to her and say, listen, you can't talk to me like that, because then that's me pushing her feelings down. And even though I deserve to be respected, she also doesn't deserve to be hurt. And I may not be trying to hurt her because I'm just asserting myself that I need to be respected. And when you're in the same room as me, you need to respect me. And I'm just being kind to you. My feelings are important, but so are hers. And I take on the responsibility as the wiser person, because of the knowledge that I have from my experiences, to go to her and to say, instead of that assertiveness of, here's my kindness,
Right.
um, and just and if I want to be respected, the best way to do that is to respect her where she's at and not require her to come to where I am and to respect me this way. I can get respect from her, but I have to accept it the way she gives it.
Yes.
if
You
that
know,
makes sense. I said it.
there's a philosopher from the 50s. Her name is Eva Perakis. And one of the things she would talk about was that the person who is more spiritually evolved in a relationship has the responsibility to guide the relationship. So the trauma that I went through as a kid, as I said, gave me certain tools. It created an observer. It gave me compassion. It gave me compassion for myself, because if I could forgive, a pedophile and narcissistic emotional abuse, and if I can, forgive all of these things, and no, my father was not the one that molested me, not at all. He was just struggling with his own emotional issues. This was kind of a side effect of how I was shaped, that it made me more of a victim and easier prey. So, but it's because I've been through these experiences and I've had to work through them and process through them, it gives you insights and understandings and clarity about people. And you can see them and you can say to yourself, okay, this is the direction I want the relationship to go. You don't leave it kind of for, catch as catch can, and well, I'll just deal, we'll just deal with it when we come to it. You're more like, I see who you are, and let's try some of these strategies of kindness and love and support and see if we can help shape you into a healthier version of yourself.
Hmm.
Because we become most like the 5 people we spend the most time with. And when we do that, if you spend time with people who are kind and loving, that starts to imprint on you. And it
Hmm.
starts to change your thinking and your behavior and how you relate to everybody. And so, me as the person who's been processing through, trauma for decades, is the one who is now responsible for helping the people around me love themselves more and respect themselves more and make better choices. And so, a lot of times narcissists really don't have too many friends. They've got a lot of, acquaintances and people who really like them, but they don't allow much intimacy and
Mm-mm.
closeness and vulnerability. And I can feel that defensiveness and that wall in people, and I have the ability to look past it and say, I know nobody really likes you because you're kind of a jerk when they really get to know you. But I see you. I see what's going
Hmm.
on. And I'm able to keep that objective opinion and be like, okay, let's see if these things work. It's not taking ownership for how they feel. It's not it at all. It's taking ownership for how I relate to them and how I want to impact or influence their life. And then that'll just go the way that it does. Do I want to impact it in a helpful way? And sometimes it means something that's tough. Sometimes it means something that draws a line, because many times when people are in pain, they can't, it's hard to get past that pain. They need something that's
Hmm.
a little bit more vibrant. And so I'm able to look at a situation and choose which reaction or which strategy I kind of want to use to take us in the right direction. Is right now the time that I need to be more vulnerable? Is now the time that I need to be more assertive? Do I need to set a very clear boundary so they understand that I respect myself and I expect them to respect me? So it's not always, fun and fuzzy and cute and adorable. Many times it can also be, no, this
Hmm.
is, and I'm going to storm out in order to make make the point, make the impact so that it's memorable. I did that with my dad once at breakfast. It was in the very beginning when I first started to go and do breakfast with my family every Sunday. And he started to kind of go after my sister for a choice that she made at work, that she was unsettled about. And he started to really go after her. And I let myself get mad. I let myself be angry and practically walk out of the restaurant. And it's a small restaurant. We eat there every Sunday. It's a total hole in the wall. Half of it in the back is a bar. They don't have any fresh vegetables or fresh fruit of any kind. It's safest to go with the hard boiled eggs, and bring your own tea and bring your own, country crock or whatever you want to bring. So it's small. It's got like 15 tables. And I'm standing there ready to walk out because I needed to make this point. I needed to demonstrate to my father that it was not okay
Hmm.
that he treated my sister in this way, so that it would be memorable for him. And ever since, not a problem.
Hmm.
So we have to, love isn't only kindness and, and nurturing that way. It's also helping people recognize, look, if you want better relationship and social skills and you want more people in your life to want to spend time with you, you need to shift these behaviors. And if I'd rather that I be the one to do it because I love you, I'm
Right.
going to keep coming back. I don't want some stranger to do road rage on you, and and now your car's totaled. You want me to do it because I'm looking out for your best interests and
Hmm.
I love you. So that's one of the neat things about that I've developed through doing the healing work. Past the narcissism is you get past the idea that love has to be pretty. A lot of
Hmm.
times, love is much bigger than that. You know, and it's good to do it with intention.
Yes. And a little side note, if you're looking for an extra advantage, when you learn all of these tools and these communication skills, a nice added bonus that I recently discovered, is I'm really good at talking to customer service when something has not gone well, and being able to move the conversation and the direction that I want it to go. So if you're looking for an added bonus,
Right. And there's all
um,
sorts of added bonuses that come from it, you
yes, the
know?
phone company doesn't, they are afraid when I'm on the phone. Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
we pissed off Patty.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
that,
Right.
um,
Just recognize what energy is needed for what situation, and
mhm,
you go
yeah,
with it.
and yeah, and you learn to practice that balance of your level of assertiveness and your level of um, kindness and respect. And there's every single situation is going to be different, because it's a different environment for each person. It's a
Mhm.
different, a different interaction, the people, the players. You know, here's a perfect example is you and I have two totally completely different stories and experiences, yet there's so many similarities to it, and we have the ability to come together and talk about um, our experiences and where we've come since then, and yet it's two totally different experiences. Your environment as a child, with your father, my environment as an adult, um, with this other person, and and it's always going to be different. And I think that's the key to all of what we're saying is an excellent human skill that you can acquire is all of these tools, the consciousness of being able to see somebody, every single person that you interact with, not just um as another human being, but another human being who has their own life and their own traumas and their own experiences, and the ability to meet that person where they're at. That is not only going to help you in your personal relationships, it's going to help you in your business relationships, and all of the interactions that you have, is that skill of being able to recognize that person, and then assessing the situation and what's the best way for me to communicate to this person so that
Yes.
my message gets across to them.
Yes.
And taking that to the next level, one of my all-time favorite books, um, about how to relate to other people is, and I don't remember his first name, but it's Chapman. Chapman is the last name, wrote The Five Love Languages.
Oh, right, right,
I, right. So as you start to interact with people and understand that, when someone interacts with you in a way that you don't feel comfortable with, that's the first thing is, one, is this a dangerous situation, or is this a, because if it's a dangerous situation, you may need to, just, get away right away.
right,
But maybe a kind of situation where, like this woman that I'm interacting with, through work, it's not a dangerous situation. I'm not, there's not a threat. There's not even danger of her hurting me mentally or emotionally. So I'm able to, assess that and say, okay, here's another person who I interact with, and I don't feel good about our interaction. When I leave there, I'm like, what did I do? And so then I assess that situation and realize that she's not just a human being, but a human being with trauma and her own experiences in her life. And once I'm able to meet her where she's at, I can then communicate with her in the language that she will respond to in the way that I want her to. And that's a friendly, co-worker, friend kind of environment. But I have the ability to take the control of the situation, and it's not manipulating her, um, because it's turning it into a better situation instead of a more toxic, negative situation.
yeah,
And the hope is that that will be the example to her, because if there aren't very many people in her world talking nicely to her, the last thing that she needs is another person not being
right,
nice to her. And
right.
so I'm not going to stop um, giving her what I've recognized as her love language of positive affirmations.
Mm-hmm,
She needs to know that
mm-hmm.
people care.
Yeah, that there's other people out there and another way to do this. Hey, do you know what time it is?
Mm, 9:29.
Okay, so let's wrap this up, shall we?
We did
It goes
excellent on the
fast. It's
timing.
like a time vortex, isn't it? So I thank you so much for being on, Patty. I really appreciate it. So many wonderful insights and gold nuggets and things. I'm so grateful to have you in my life and have you as a friend. And it
Thank
means a
you.
lot to me that you would come on and really share intimately with your past and your experiences to help other people through this. It means a lot that you'd show up and do this. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. The honor and the privilege is mine. I truly believe that the experience that I had, as ugly and unpleasant and traumatic as it was, um, I sit here today and say that experience was a gift.
Yes.
That God believed that I I could take it. And it was as much as it hurt me, I'm sure it hurt him that I had to go through it, but he knew of what could come of it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
not that not that it was intentional or I deserved it, but
Right.
he knew that there was hope,
Yes.
and that I could take that experience and do this and be
Yes.
here and share it, because somebody is going to watch this,
Yep.
and somebody is going to hear what they need to hear.
Yes.
And so that is where we, Rita and myself, are gifted. Our experiences, as much as they are traumas in our life, they're also a gift. And I'm accepting of that gift, because if one person watches this and hears what we're talking about in this conversation, and it allows them to open up their mind and have that aha moment and make a transition and a change in their life, because each and every one of us as human beings, um, has the right to joy and happiness in our
Yes.
lives. And the
Yes.
power and the ability is there. Um, Sometimes we just need someone to help us see it. So thank
Absolutely.
you so much, not only for
Absolutely.
letting me be here, but for putting this together.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I will see you soon then, okay? And I'm going to
Yes,
sign
sounds
off.
wonderful.
Have a
All
great
right.
night. Thanks,
You too.
Patty.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, bye.